When I walked past the bakery window that morning, I stopped dead in my tracks. There it was, the same name, the same logo I had designed by hand 2 years ago. Only this time, the sign above the door read, "Owned and managed by Sarah and David Brooks." My name wasn't there anymore. My throat tightened. My palms went cold. For a moment, I stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring through the glass at the place I had poured every bit of my heart into. Inside, familiar shelves gleamed under soft yellow lights. I could still picture myself there, arranging muffins, wiping counters, humming along to the radio. But now, it was someone else's laughter echoing from behind the counter. I guess I should start from the beginning. My name is Emily Brooks, and I thought I had everything figured out. I was married to Daniel Steady, charming, ambitious Daniel, and together, we dreamed of building something of our own. Not just a business, but a legacy. Daniel had worked in corporate finance for over a decade, but after his father passed, something in him changed. He wanted out of the city grind, out of numbers and conference calls. I was the one who had always loved baking, small-town fairs, charity events, birthday cakes for friends, and he'd said one evening, over a quiet dinner at home, "Why don't we make this your business, Em? You've got the gift. I'll handle the rest." It sounded so simple, so romantic. The plan was to open a cozy bakery, Butter and Bloom. We'd use the small inheritance from his father's estate as seed money. I'd manage the creative side, the recipes, the aesthetics. Daniel would take care of the paperwork, licenses, and finances. We made lists together late at night, scrawled in the margins of old notebooks, our mugs of tea growing cold as we dreamed aloud. I remember that early stage like a warm, honey-colored blur, the smell of fresh paint in the shop, the hum of the refrigerator before dawn. The way Daniel would squeeze my hand and say, "This is all yours, babe. I just built the frame. You're the heart of it." Then came Sarah. Daniel's sister was complicated, beautiful, confident, and endlessly opinionated. She worked in marketing and loved to remind everyone about it. I always tried to keep the peace. She was family, after all. But Sarah had a way of making me feel small, as if everything I did was a little naive, a little amateur. When Daniel told me he'd asked her to help with branding, I swallowed my discomfort and smiled. "It's just for a few weeks," he said. "She knows business, Em. We'll need that edge." I told myself it would be fine, that she'd help with a few logos, maybe some online ads. But from the moment she walked in, she took up space, rearranging the menu boards, advising on pricing, even questioning the way I decorated cupcakes. Still, I bit my tongue. It was family, and I didn't want to start something ugly. The bakery opened in the spring, and the first few months were blissful chaos. We were doing well, better than I'd dared to dream. Locals loved it. Mothers with toddlers, teenagers after school, older couples who came just to sit and talk. I felt proud, exhausted, alive. Daniel seemed proud too. He'd stop by on weekends, notebook in hand, always talking about growth potential and long-term goals. Then, one night over dinner, he dropped the news. He'd been offered a temporary contract abroad. 6 months in Singapore. Big money, short-term project. "I'll be back before you know it," he said, "and we'll be set financially. Just keep things running. You and Sarah can handle it." I remember hesitating, twisting my fork on the plate. "Sarah and I." He smiled, oblivious. "She's got the paperwork side down. Don't worry, she'll help with the management stuff while I'm gone." At first, things went smoothly. Sarah was efficient, I'll give her that. She made spreadsheets, introduced an online delivery system, and said she'd modernize operations. I stayed focused on the baking, the customers, the warmth, but slowly, things began to shift. First, it was the sign outside, a subtle change in the color palette. Then, the menu. She removed my favorite lemon lavender muffins, calling them too niche. One day, she brought in a photographer to take pictures for our rebranding campaign. When the photos came back, I noticed something odd. Every shot featured Sarah, smiling behind the counter, holding a tray, laughing with customers. I was in none of them. When I pointed it out, she laughed. Oh, don't take it personally, Emily. You were busy that day. I had to fill in. It stung, but I brushed it off. I told myself she was just overenthusiastic. Still, there were moments, little signs that made me uneasy. One morning, I came in early and found her talking on the phone in the office. Her voice hushed. No, just sign under my name. Daniel already agreed. She doesn't need to know yet. When she saw me, she froze. Oh hey, just talking to the printer about invoices, she said, smiling too quickly. I wanted to ask, what doesn't she need to know? But I didn't. Instead, I told myself not to overthink. Daniel trusted her. Maybe I should too. Then came the first letter. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, a plain white envelope addressed to Butter and Bloom, ATN owner. Inside was a document stamped with our bank's logo. It was a notification of account change authorization. At the bottom, in neat blue ink, were two signatures, Sarah Brooks and David Brooks. Mine was missing. I remember my hands shaking as I reread the page. The letter said, effective immediately. Signatories on the business account have been updated to reflect new management status. I felt dizzy. I called Daniel that night, midnight his time. He sounded half asleep, irritated. It's nothing. Sarah just needed access to handle payments while I'm gone. It's all legal. Stop worrying. But why remove my name? I whispered. He sighed. It's just temporary. You're not used to business formalities. Okay, let me handle it. I hung up, heart pounding. For the first time since we'd opened, I didn't sleep at all that night. The next few weeks were a blur of tension and confusion. Sarah stopped sharing financial updates with me. When I asked for invoices, she'd say, Daniel already approved those. Didn't he tell you? Customers started calling her the manager. And every time I corrected them, I felt smaller, powerless. The final blow came the morning I found the locks changed. It was early, just past 6. I arrived with a box of fresh croissants, humming under my breath. But my key didn't fit. I tried again, and again. Then I noticed a small notice taped to the door. Closed for private reopening under new management. I remember standing there on the sidewalk, the dawn light catching in my tears. The city was waking up around me, cars passing, people walking by. And there I was, the woman who thought she owned a dream, now locked out of it. I don't remember how long I stood there that morning, maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour. All I know is that my hands wouldn't stop trembling, and my chest felt tight, like the air had turned heavy. Through the window, I could see Sarah moving around confidently, my apron tied neatly around her waist. My apron, the one with tiny embroidered daisies I had stitched by hand on our opening day. She didn't even look up as I knocked. Instead, she motioned for one of the new girls, someone I barely recognized, to come to the door. The girl opened it just a few inches. Hi, she said nervously. Sarah said the store's closed for today. Maybe come back tomorrow. I swallowed hard. Tell her it's Emily. This is my bakery. She nodded, disappeared inside. I waited, clutching the box of croissants tighter. The buttery scent filling the air around me like a cruel reminder of everything I'd built. After what felt like forever, Sarah finally appeared. Her expression was calm, too calm. Oh, Emily, she said, stepping out and gently closing the door behind her. You didn't get my email? Email. My voice cracked. What email? She sighed as though I were being difficult. The transfer of management paperwork went through last week. It's all finalized. Daniel signed it before he left. We had to restructure ownership to keep the business running smoothly. You know, logistics. I stared at her, stunned. Restructure? What are you talking about? This was our business. Mine, Daniel promised. Sarah raised a hand, cutting me off. Emily, please, don't make this emotional. You're wonderful at what you do, but you're not equipped for the operational side. Daniel understood that. It's not personal. not personal. The words hit like cold water. I felt something collapse inside me, a quiet breaking that made everything suddenly too bright, too sharp. You changed the locks, I whispered. It was necessary, she said evenly. Legal transition requires control over assets. Look, I'll send you the paperwork once everything's settled. Maybe we can find a way for you to stay involved, part-time, maybe as a consultant. Consultant. Like I was some stranger. Some outsider. I remember the street light flickering above us as she turned to go back inside. That's when I said, Sarah, does Daniel know what you've done? She paused at the door, looked back at me with a faint smile. Of course he does. He signed everything himself. That night, I didn't cry. I just sat in silence at our dining table, the same one where Daniel and I had once planned our dream. The house felt too big without him, too empty. I opened my laptop and reread the bank letter over and over, hoping maybe I'd misunderstood something. But there it was, in black and white, effective immediately. New management assigned to Sarah Brooks and David Brooks. My husband's name. My sister-in-law's name. Not mine. The betrayal hit in slow waves. Not just from Sarah, I'd almost expected something from her, but from Daniel. The man who had looked me in the eyes and promised, "This is yours." That night, I drafted an email to him. I wrote and deleted it 3 times before hitting send. Daniel, I went to the bakery today. The locks are changed. Sarah says you signed everything over. Please tell me this isn't true. Emily. He didn't reply for 2 days. When he finally did, it was short. I know you're upset. I had to make a quick decision for the sake of the business. Sarah's better equipped to manage until I return. Let's talk when I'm back. No apology, no explanation. Just cold, managerial phrasing, as if I were an employee he'd reassigned. Over the next few weeks, I spiraled. I tried calling him again and again, but the time difference, his new project, his silence, it all built a wall between us. Sarah ignored my messages. When I finally went to the bakery again, I wasn't even allowed past the door. They had changed everything. New colors, new logo, new uniforms. My recipes were still there, but she'd renamed them. Sarah's signature cinnamon loaf. The Brooks blend brownie. It was like watching my own memories rewritten in someone else's handwriting. The days turned into weeks. I started to question myself. Maybe I had been too emotional, too trusting, too naive. My mother called one afternoon and heard it in my voice immediately. What's wrong? I told her everything. There was silence on the line for a long moment. Then she said, softly, you have 2 choices. You can let them take everything, your work, your confidence, your name, or you can remind them who you are. Her words stuck to me like honey, slow, steady, grounding. That night, I went through every file, every receipt I could find. Old invoices, ingredient orders, supplier contracts, all of them had my name on them. My handwriting, my design, my recipes. If they wanted to erase me, I wasn't going to make it easy. The next morning, I put on my favorite blue scarf, the one Daniel had bought me years ago, and walked straight into the local bank. The manager, Mr. Lang, was an older gentleman who had handled our bakery loan when we first started. Mrs. Brooks, he said kindly, how's Butter and Bloom going? I heard it's under new management. I forced a small smile. That's actually what I came to talk about. When I explained what had happened, his face darkened. Do you have documentation showing your original ownership? I nodded and handed him the folder I'd brought. Copies of initial business filings, invoices, and, most importantly, the first registration form Daniel and I had signed together. He flipped through it carefully. Well, this shows you as co-founder and initial co-owner. Any transfer of ownership would require your signature. Did you sign anything? No, I said firmly. Never. He leaned back in his chair, eyes thoughtful. Then something's not right here. That moment sparked something in me, a quiet flame I hadn't felt in months. For the first time, I realized I wasn't powerless. Maybe I couldn't undo what Daniel and Sarah had done overnight, but I could fight for the truth. I spent the next few weeks meeting with a lawyer, gathering documents, and slowly piecing together what they had orchestrated behind my back. Turns out, Sarah had forged an operational amendment using a general power of attorney Daniel had signed before leaving. He had assumed it was just for bank access. She used it to transfer management control. It was legal, but deeply unethical. And it was the first time I saw Daniel's weakness clearly, his blind trust in his sister, his need to control from afar. One evening, after weeks of silence, Daniel finally called. "Emily," he said, his voice careful, "I heard you've been talking to lawyers. That's unnecessary." "Unnecessary," I repeated. "You handed over our business, Daniel, the one you said was mine. And you didn't even have the decency to tell me." He sighed. "You're overreacting. Sarah's just helping. Don't make this a family war." "Then stop treating me like a stranger in my own life," I said quietly. "Because I won't stay silent anymore." He didn't answer. Just the sound of his breathing through the static line, heavy and distant. When the call ended, I sat in the dark for a long time, not crying this time, but clear. Something in me had shifted. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. For months, I hadn't had the strength to even bake for myself, but that day, I needed it. The kitchen felt quiet, almost sacred. I tied my hair back, rolled up my sleeves, and started from memory. No recipes, no measurements, just instinct. The smell of warm cinnamon and butter filled the air, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't hurt. It reminded me of me. Not the wife, not the betrayed business partner, just Emily, the girl who used to bake because it made people smile. By sunrise, I had trays lined with golden loaves and small jars of my homemade jam, the same ones that had once made our bakery famous. I looked at them and whispered, "You built this. You'll build again." And that's exactly what I did. A few weeks later, I rented a tiny corner space in town. Nothing fancy, just enough for a small oven and 2 tables. I didn't tell anyone. I called it Daisy and Crumb, after the daisies I'd embroidered on that first apron. No signboard, no announcement. Just me, my recipes, and my quiet determination. On the first day, I made $68. On the second, $124. By the end of the first month, customers were coming back, not for the decor or the name, but for the taste they said felt like home. Then, one afternoon, while I was refilling the jam jars, I heard the bell above the door ring. I turned and froze. It was Sarah. She looked almost uncomfortable. "Well," she said, forcing a smile, "I see you've found a little hobby." I didn't reply. I just kept wiping the counter. She glanced around the tiny shop, the crowded shelves, the smiling photos of regular customers pinned to the wall. "It's cute," she said finally. "You always were good with small things." I felt my jaw tighten. "Small things built your success." Her smile faltered. "Oh, come on, Emily. Don't be dramatic. You should be thanking me. I saved Butter and Bloom." "By stealing it?" I asked quietly. She blinked. "You wouldn't understand. Business isn't about feelings." "No," I said, looking her dead in the eyes. "It's about values. Which you clearly never had." She exhaled sharply and stepped closer. "You think people won't find out what you're doing here. You're using the same recipes. That's our intellectual property now." I smiled faintly. "Actually, no. My lawyer confirmed that every one of these recipes was written, signed, and copyrighted under my name, long before you took anything. So technically, if anyone's violating ownership," I let the words hang. Her face drained of color. "You wouldn't dare." I met her gaze calmly. "Try me." After she left, I locked the door and sat down, shaking not from fear, but from something fiercer. For the first time, I realized I wasn't scared of her anymore. They had money, lawyers, influence, but I had something they couldn't fake: authenticity. 2 weeks later, it happened. A local food blogger, a sweet girl named Mia who had stumbled into my shop one rainy afternoon, posted a review titled, "Meet the Woman Who Bakes with Her Heart, the Real Story Behind Daisy and Crumb." Within hours, it started spreading. People connected the dots. The comments flooded in. Wait, isn't this the original Butter and Bloom founder? So she was the one who created those recipes. No wonder the new bakery tastes different. She's the real one. By the end of the week, the story had gone viral in our town. People started lining up outside Daisy and Crumb at 6 a.m. Some brought flowers, others just said, "We're sorry for what they did." I didn't expect sympathy, but what I got instead was validation, proof that truth has a way of resurfacing, no matter how much people try to bury it. And then, Daniel came back. He showed up one evening after closing time, standing outside my little shop, looking older than I remembered. I opened the door slowly. "Emily," he said softly, "you look different." "I am different," I said. "What do you want, Daniel?" He hesitated, glancing at the counter, the framed photos, the tiny chalkboard that read "Made with Honesty and Heart." "I heard about the article," he said. "Sarah's furious. Investors are pulling out. The bakery's not doing well." I crossed my arms. "That's not my problem." He nodded slowly. "I know, but maybe we can fix things. Together, like before." I laughed a small, tired laugh. "You mean like when you signed my life's work away behind my back?" He looked down. "I made a mistake. I thought I was protecting us," Sarah said. "Sarah said," I interrupted. "That's the problem, Daniel. You always listened to her. Never to me." He looked up then, desperate. "Emily, please, I miss you. I miss us." I looked at him for a long moment, this man who had once been my partner in every dream, and I realized something. I didn't miss us. I missed who I used to be before he made me doubt my worth. So I said the words I'd waited months to say. "You didn't protect me, Daniel. You erased me. And now, I'm finally remembering who I am without you." His eyes filled with tears, but I didn't flinch. I stepped closer, holding his gaze. "You can keep Butter and Bloom. It's just a building now. But this," I gestured around my tiny shop, "this is mine. Every brick, every smell, every crumb." Then I added softly, "And you'll never take that from me again." He left quietly, shoulders slumped. And as I locked the door behind him, I felt something lift a weight I'd carried for far too long. Outside, the streetlights shimmered on the wet pavement. Inside, the air was warm with the smell of sugar and cinnamon, my smell, my home. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I was free. The next morning, when I unlocked the door, there was a note taped to the window. It said, "Dear Emily, thank you for standing up, for reminding women like me that starting over isn't weakness, it's power. A customer who believes in you." I smiled, because that's when I finally understood something. They took my business. But I built something bigger. A name that stood for honesty, resilience, and self-worth, and no signature could ever take that away. It happened almost 6 months later, on one of those gray afternoons that smelled of rain and tired hope. Business at Daisy and Crumb was steady, even thriving. I had 2 employees now, kind girls who laughed easily, who loved baking like I did. We'd play old jazz records while kneading dough, humming along to Ella Fitzgerald as customers filtered in. Life had softened again. I still woke early, still worked hard, but I wasn't running from pain anymore. I was walking toward peace. And that's when the past came knocking. Literally. The bell above the door chimed, and when I looked up, I saw her. Sarah, except this time, she didn't look like the woman who once stole my dream. She looked small. Her makeup was smudged from the rain, her blazer hung off her shoulders, and the sharp, proud tilt of her chin was gone. For a moment, she just stood there, wet, trembling, out of breath. I didn't speak. I let the silence stretch between us, until it became almost unbearable. Finally, she said quietly, "Emily, we need to talk." I motioned toward a corner table. "Go ahead." She sat down, wrapping her arms around herself like she was cold. When she spoke, her voice cracked. The bakery, Butter and Bloom. It's gone under. The investors pulled out. Rent's overdue. We're days away from closing. I watched her face, the panic, the exhaustion, the fear she had once made me feel. Still, I didn't speak. She took a deep breath, then whispered, I need your help. I tilted my head slightly. My help? To do what, Sarah? Her eyes darted around the shop, the shelves, the warm lights, the happy customers at the counter. You've rebuilt everything. You have the recipes, the connection with people. I thought maybe we could merge. Work together again. I let out a quiet laugh. Not cruel, just weary. You mean after you erased my name, took my business, and told everyone I was unstable? Her face flushed. That wasn't me. That was Daniel's idea. He said we had to protect the brand. I was just following orders. I interrupted softly. Yes, you were always good at that. She looked down at her trembling hands. I made mistakes, Emily. I see that now. I thought I was helping the family. I didn't mean to hurt you like that. I leaned back, studying her. You didn't just hurt me. You made me question everything I believed about loyalty. Her voice broke. Please, Emily, I'm begging you. I have nowhere else to go. And for a moment, just a moment, I saw the woman behind the arrogance. Not the manipulator. Not the thief. Just a woman terrified of losing everything she built on lies. I took a slow breath and said, You know, Sarah, you once told me business isn't about feelings. But that's where you were wrong. Feelings are the foundation: trust, respect, honesty. Without them, you can't build anything that lasts. She blinked, tears spilling down. So that's it. You're just going to let me fall. I met her gaze. No, Sarah, you let yourself fall. I'm just not jumping in after you. She covered her face, sobbing quietly. For a long time, the only sound was the rain tapping against the window. When she finally looked up again, her voice was barely a whisper. You've changed. I smiled gently. I had to. You can't rise if you keep crawling back into the mud. She wiped her tears, stood shakily, and said, For what it's worth, I'm sorry. And then she left. I watched through the window as she disappeared into the gray rain, her umbrella turning inside out with the wind. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel anger. I just felt peace. Later that evening, as I cleaned up, one of my employees, Leela, walked over. Was that your Ternala? She asked carefully. I nodded. She looked rough. Leela said softly, Are you okay? I smiled faintly. I'm better than okay. Leela hesitated. You didn't, offer to help her. I shook my head. Sometimes, helping someone means letting them face the weight of their choices. She needed that more than she needed me. Leela nodded slowly. That's strong. Maybe, I said. Or maybe it's just time. A week later, the news broke that Butter and Bloom had officially closed its doors. There was no big announcement, no grand farewell, just a quiet note taped to the glass. Thank you for your support all these years. Management. I went by one morning, just to see. The windows were dark. The air inside looked empty, still carrying the faint ghost of vanilla and regret. I stood there for a moment, remembering everything I had lost in that place. And then I turned around and walked away. Back at Daisy and Crumb, the morning crowd was already waiting, laughter spilling from the line outside, the smell of fresh bread floating through the air. As I tied on my apron, I thought about something my grandmother used to say. Sometimes the storm doesn't destroy you, it just clears your path. And that was exactly what had happened. Because if they hadn't betrayed me, I might still be there baking for someone else's dream, mistaking silence for peace. Now, I was baking for myself. That evening, as I sat by the window with a cup of chamomile tea, I took out my old recipe book, the one with flour stains and scribbled notes. I turned to the first page, where I had once written, in childish handwriting, Someday, I'll build something beautiful that's mine. I smiled. You did, little one, I whispered. You really did. And as the last light faded, I felt grateful for every mistake, every betrayal, every painful lesson. Because they hadn't just broken me. They'd forged me into something stronger. But life, as it always does, had one more twist waiting. A few weeks later, I got an unexpected visitor again. This time, it wasn't Sarah. It was Daniel. He looked even worse than before, thinner, weary, defeated. And what he said next changed everything I thought I knew about their betrayal. He showed up just as I was closing the shop. The open sign was still swinging faintly on the door when I saw him standing outside, hair disheveled, jacket damp from the evening drizzle, a man who looked like he'd run out of excuses long ago. For a second, I didn't move. I just watched him through the glass, the same man who'd once promised me forever, and then handed my dreams to someone else. He lifted a hesitant hand, knocked softly. I took a breath and opened the door. Emily, he said quietly. His voice was hoarse, the kind that comes from sleepless nights and too many swallowed words. Daniel. We just stared at each other for a long beat. Then I stepped aside. You can come in, but I'm not staying long. I have closing to do. He nodded, stepped inside, and looked around at the warm lights, the smell of cinnamon, the laughter still lingering from earlier customers. His eyes softened. You really did it. You made it work. Yes, I said simply. I did. We sat at a corner table, the same one Sarah had sat in weeks earlier, except now the air was different. He looked smaller somehow, like the world had finally caught up to him. He rubbed his hands together, then said, I owe you the truth. I folded my arms. You think so? I know so, he said. And I don't expect forgiveness. I just need to say it. So I let him talk. When I left for that overseas contract, I meant what I told you. I really did plan to expand the bakery to make it our family business. But while I was gone, things started falling apart. I was bad at communication. I let my sister handle too much. He paused, looking down at his hands. Sarah said you were struggling, that you were overwhelmed, burning out, making rash decisions. She told me she was stepping in to help. I believed her. I signed some paperwork she sent me electronically. I thought it was to transfer management rights temporarily. He looked up at me, guilt swimming in his eyes. But it wasn't. It was a full transfer of ownership. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. You're saying you didn't even read what you signed? He winced. I trusted her. She said it was time sensitive. I just wanted to keep things running smoothly. I leaned back, trying to process it all. So you gave her everything without even checking? He nodded slowly. I was stupid. And when I came back, she'd already rebranded, changed suppliers, locked you out. She said you'd left voluntarily after a fight. I didn't know what to believe. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. So you believed her again? He looked pained. You wouldn't answer my calls, Em. You'd blocked me. When I finally tried to talk, you were gone. And honestly, I didn't have the courage to face what I'd done. For a long moment, I said nothing. The ticking of the old clock filled the silence between us. Finally, I said quietly, do you know what it felt like, Daniel? Watching everything we built disappear overnight. Being told I was irrelevant, that my work didn't matter, that I didn't matter. His eyes glistened. I do now. I lost more than a business, Emily. I lost you. I wanted to feel sorry for him. I wanted to reach across the table and remember the man I once loved. But I couldn't. Because the man sitting across from me wasn't the same one who'd built that bakery with me. This one was tired, broken, too late. After a long silence, he asked, did she come here? Sarah. Yes, I said. She came asking for help. He looked surprised. And you? I wished her well, I said simply. And then I let her go. He nodded slowly, as if that answer made sense. Then he whispered, I left her too. The guilt. It was eating me alive. We don't even talk anymore. Good, I said softly. It's time you stopped letting her run your life. He looked around the shop again, the soft lights, the faint music playing from the kitchen radio. This place feels like you, he said. Warm, real. I gave a small smile. It is. Every recipe, every color, every smell, it's mine. No one can sign that away. He reached into his pocket and slid a folded document across the table. This is the official dissolution of our shared business accounts. I should have done this long ago. You're free of all ties to me financially and legally. I looked down at the papers, then back at him. That's unexpected. He sighed. It's the least I can do. I hesitated, then said, Daniel, can I ask you something? Anything? When you signed those papers, when you trusted her over me, did you ever stop and think about what that said to me, that you'd rather believe your sister than your wife? He swallowed hard. Every day since, and I hate myself for it. I studied his face, the lines deeper now, his eyes softer. He was finally seeing what I'd felt. I nodded slowly. Then maybe that's your punishment, not my anger, but your memory. He nodded, his voice almost breaking. I deserve that. We sat in silence again, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the soft rain outside. Finally, he stood, tucking his hands into his pockets. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for, Emily. I see that now. I always was, I said quietly. You just never looked long enough to notice. He gave a small, sad smile. Goodbye, Emily. Goodbye, Daniel. And just like that, he was gone. That night, as I locked up and turned off the lights, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was release. I had finally heard the truth, and it didn't hurt anymore. Because I had built something stronger from the ruins, something that no signature, no betrayal, no storm could ever take from me again. Weeks passed. The shop grew busier. My laughter came easier. But one quiet morning, I got a letter in the mail, plain white envelope, no return address. When I opened it, there were only a few words written in Sarah's handwriting. Thank you for not saving me. It made me stronger too. I smiled. For the first time, it wasn't a bitter smile, just peaceful. That's how I knew the story was over. Not because they'd apologized. Not because I'd won. But because I no longer needed either of them to define me. A few months passed after Daniel's visit. The days rolled on quietly, like gentle waves that no longer carried the storm's memory. I'd stopped waiting for anything. No more apologies, no more justice, no more reckoning, just life. Simple, steady, sweet. Every morning, I opened the shop at sunrise. The smell of coffee and cinnamon drifted into the street before the world was even fully awake. There was something sacred about that, a moment of peace before the chatter, before the day began demanding things from me. Leela would arrive with her messy bun and her unshakable optimism, humming whatever song was stuck in her head that week. Sometimes she'd say, Miss Emily, you're smiling again without realizing it. And maybe she was right. Maybe, finally, the smile had become real. One afternoon, I was teaching a young trainee how to fold pastry dough properly. She was 19, nervous, hands trembling like she was holding glass. I guided her gently. Don't force it, I said softly. Let the dough tell you when it's ready. She looked up at me. You make it sound like the dough's alive. I smiled. It kind of is. Everything worth creating has a heartbeat, if you listen closely enough. Her laughter filled the kitchen, light and full of promise. And in that moment, I realized something profound. I wasn't rebuilding anymore. I was building. Period. The destruction, the betrayal, the loss, all of it had been the soil for something new. On Sundays, I'd close the bakery early and drive to the old part of town near the park where Daniel and I had first planned the business. There was a bench under a magnolia tree, and I'd sit there with a cup of coffee, watching the petals fall like slow snow. Once, that place had felt haunted. Now it just felt quiet. Sometimes, I thought about Sarah and wondered what she was doing. Whether she'd started over, or found her own kind of peace. I hoped she had. Not because she deserved it, but because I did. I'd spent too long holding pain that wasn't mine to carry. Letting go didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing myself again, every single day. One evening, near closing time, a woman in her 50s came in, tired eyes, hands rough from years of work. She ordered a coffee and a slice of pie, and, as I served her, she said softly, "You're the owner, right? I just wanted to say, I come here every day after work because it reminds me that life can start over. You've made this place feel like hope." I froze for a second, caught off guard by the kindness. Then I smiled. "That means more than you know." When she left, I stood at the counter, looking around the soft yellow lights, the chalkboard menu, the laughter echoing faintly from the kitchen. Hope. That's what I had rebuilt. Not a bakery, not a business. A living reminder that broken things can still bloom. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my old journal, the one I hadn't opened since before the betrayal. The last entry was dated over 2 years ago. It read, "We're about to open the business. I'm scared but excited. I just hope he believes in me the way I believe in him." I ran my fingers over the ink, smudged from old tears. Then I turned the page and started writing again. I believed in him once, but now I believe in myself. That's enough. I closed the book, took a deep breath, and felt the quiet hum of peace settle deep inside me. Some nights, when the bakery was empty and the lights were dimmed, I'd talk to my grandmother in my head, the woman who'd taught me everything about baking, patience, and strength. I'd say, "You were right, Grandma. The recipe for peace really is simple. A little pain, a little patience, and a whole lot of faith." And in that soft silence, I could almost hear her chuckle. "See, you didn't need them to keep your flame burning, sweetheart. You just needed to stop standing in their shadow." 6 months later, Daisy Crumb won a local award for Best New Small Business. It wasn't a huge thing, just a framed certificate and a small feature in the local paper, but to me, it was everything. At the ceremony, the host handed me the microphone and said, "Would you like to say a few words?" I wasn't expecting to speak, but the words came easily. I started this bakery after losing everything I thought I needed to survive: my business, my marriage, my trust. But what I gained was far more valuable. I learned that starting over isn't about replacing what's gone. It's about rediscovering who you are without it. So to anyone standing in the ashes right now, don't rush to rebuild. Sit with it. Learn from it. Because sometimes, the ashes are where your real foundation begins. The audience went silent for a moment, then erupted into gentle applause. I smiled, not for the recognition, but for the truth of what I'd said. That night, after the event, I stood outside the bakery, looking up at the soft glow of the sign. "Daisy Crumb." I whispered quietly, "We made it." And I swear, the wind outside carried the faint smell of vanilla and magnolia, like the world was saying it back to me. Auntie May style, closing reflection. Sometimes, betrayal doesn't end with a broken heart, it ends with a breakthrough. Sometimes, the people who hurt us aren't villains, just lessons in disguise. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's building a life so peaceful, they can't reach you anymore. Tell me, dear listener, if someone took everything from you, would you try to get it back? Or would you build something entirely your own? Because I did the latter. And for the first time in my life, I'm finally free.